everyone, Ariel Adams here with Superlative Podcast. Please listen to aBlogtoWatch's other podcast, aBlogtoWatch Weekly, where we talk about the latest watch news and reviews. My guest today in Superlative is Maria Bashutkina. She is a lecturer. She's an expert in luxury watches, and she has a large role in the watch education world in Switzerland. Maria, welcome.
Thank you, Ariel. My pleasure.
So this is actually the second time we're trying to record this. We had a technical issue. So I'm going to ask you the awkward thing of introducing yourself again. The audience didn't hear the first time. I did, you did, but it's obviously very important to describe a little bit about what you do, as well as what some of your experiences. Because what I as I said earlier, what I find so interesting about you is your academic work, in addition to sort of your marketing and experiential work. So, talk a little bit about what your background is, and please emphasize the educational roles that you've had.
Okay. Come on. It's my favorite topic to talk about myself and my patients. So no problem to repeat it again. Yeah, let's do it again. Actually, I came to Switzerland 15 years ago, and I were absolutely far from watchmaking. I knew Swiss watches, but not really absolutely close to it. And then the first day I was visiting one of the watchmaking company, I've seen a watch that costed $500,000. And I tried it. It was quite impressive to have this object on the wrist. And I asked myself a question: how possible this watch could be that expensive? How possible this watch could be, because it was a very special edition with a very special features, some complications like breathtaking at that time. I wanted to understand why a watch could be that expensive and what makes this rarity and this value. So that's why I started myself learn a lot. I was taking different classes that existed at that time in Neuchâtel in Switzerland. As you know, Neuchâtel is a small town in the central part of Switzerland, close to border with France, where there are a lot of watchmaking production. It's one of the biggest places where actually watchmaking happening. So I was talking to different professionals. I had the pleasure to work for Watchmaking Institute, where we were in contact to different companies, where we were invited to different events, where we were participating ourselves or organizing ourselves different conference for professional in the industry. So that's how I started to acquire myself, to collect, to craft this knowledge I have nowadays. And then a couple years later, because I was really passionate, I was reading all the journals, all the conferences. Podcasts did not exist at that time, unfortunately. But it started to be quite serious amounts of knowledge I had. I started to teach watchmaking to Swiss students in Switzerland, in Geneva and in Neuchâtel. Then I created different educative programs for not only for students who want to discover this main industry, one of the main industries in Switzerland. I started to create educational programs for general public who like watches, who appreciate watches, who are interested, who wanted to know something about watches. Then it went even further. I started to travel because different audiences, different conferences, sometimes it were business clubs, business units who invited me to share the knowledges about watches, about watchmaking marketing, about the industry in general, because we call Swiss watches the top of luxury pyramid. The true luxury, because it's very sophisticated, very expensive. So that's how I started the development of my educative activities. And nowadays I'm teaching in France, Germany, Italy, in Switzerland. It's happened me to go to United States or to Asia to give lectures, master classes. So that's how it's all started and where it's going now.
Thank you, Maria. I wonder, how long did it take you to answer your question of why that $500,000 or 500,000 Swiss franc watch costs as much as it did?
Actually, it took me a while because I really wanted to understand the source. I really wanted not knowing that it's because of the brand or because the watch is gold or because this model is rare. I really wanted to understand from inside, okay, why this particular brand would be that appreciated, why this particular model would have this price? Why nobody managed to do this complication? It was a slot machine. Slot machine you can play on your watch, on your wrist. And
the Gerard Perregaux?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the first watch, I was introduced like this, so it was difficult to restart, to learn and to start with some basics. I mean, because every time nowadays I'm speaking to different audience, sometimes people will come to me, Maria, what I need to buy to invest? Maria, what will gain value? Maria, what is going to be more expensive, or how not to lose money? It is kind of question that's legitimate, and I understand this kind of people, but for me, it was not enough. I wanted really to know everybody, and nowadays I could say, and I could speak about 200 brands that exist in luxury watchmaking business through the development of technical characteristics, of complications, of very special models. So it took me a while in order to incorporate it, in order to really understand, not to learn because it's easy. You now you Google it with your ChatGPT and you will have an answer. But real education, real appreciation, real understanding will take time and effort.
So we talked a little bit about those people who rely on recommendations, as you said, what watch to buy. There's all kinds of lists. There's all kinds of people out there who will tell you what watches to buy. But you and I seem to understand implicitly that when you buy the watches that are popular for other people, all you're really doing is collecting the opinions of other people, and you're not really collecting for yourself. That it takes something extra to make a decision for yourself. And I call it understanding the culture. Education, of course, is the correct word, but what is it that you're educating yourself on? And I think what you're educating yourself on is the culture, how the watch industry understands itself, why the watchmakers do what they do, why someone else in the past ordered such an expensive watch, wanted such an expensive watch, appreciated such an expensive watch. These types of questions are the things you need to answer in order to get that education. It's a lot more than, I'm not going to tell you why, but I think this is an awesome watch, so you should buy it. That's not a very satisfying answer, right?
Yeah. And you're touching a very important point about watchmaking culture. That's what makes difference between Switzerland and any other countries elsewhere, because it's the culture of precision, the culture of pushing the limits, of reinvention, because since 200 years, even more, watchmaking exists. I told you there are 200 brands, and every year we have new technologies. Every year we have new complications. Every year we have new brands and new models. So it's wish to push the boundaries, to accept the limits, and to really be on the top of performance and not stopping, not making the shortcuts, not stopping on halfway to understand this. And it's something really important to Swiss people in general. Now I became Swiss, so I feel it.
How difficult was it to integrate into the watchmaking culture? Switzerland is not a particularly open place, and you came there ostensibly not having a particular entrance into the watch industry. What were some of the things that you need to do to enter this culture? Was it welcoming to you? Were they cold to you? Talk a little bit about that.
We say that to enter to Swiss watchmaking, it's harder than to enter to Swiss banking. And unfortunately, it's not a joke.
Really?
Yes, because it's a very close environment for professionals, and actually it's a very small environment. Swiss watchmaking industry is quite small. If we're talking in terms of numbers, it's much less than any other luxury industry, like hotels, like fashion, like wines, etc. It's very small by its size, by its possibilities, by whatever. And actually to enter there, it was a tricky thing, but I'm quite passionate enough, and I was really determined. I really loved what I've seen. It took me time to find my place, to prove that I know something, because when I started to give lectures, when I started to give conferences, then where things changed. And nowadays I have a pleasure to be the president, to serve as the president as a Watchmaking Marketing Symposium, where we organize professional meetings for people working in the industry. That started to change, but it took me a lot of studies. It took me a lot of networking to be in the right place on the right time. And what is funny thing? People in Switzerland, we're living in Protestant country where there is no this kind of culture of show off or checking what brands you would wear in, how you look like, etc., etc. But except the watches. And every time I was in professional meetings, I was in conferences, I was in professional fairs, everybody, right after asking for the name, they will check what is your watch. And there are some brands that are very famous, that are worldwide appreciated, but you better not to wear them, even if it's worldwide known, one of the top 2 or 3, maybe something like this. I will not give you the names. You probably understand what we are talking about. I better not wear it when I'm working in watchmaking. And not later than this year, 2025, I wore in Geneva for Watches and Wonders fair. And I was waiting for the presentation for one of the brands presented there. The manager, the marketing director who were supposed to give the conference there to present the new models, I was introduced to him. I was introduced to person who are working at these companies. They know me already. But before the presentation started, he checked my watch. And when he's seen the watch, because it really took me time to understand what should I wear in order to be accepted to this kind of audience, in order to make my statement, my personal statement. He checked my watch and he's seen what company is it, what brand is that, very respected, very old manufacturing company that do everything since the beginning by themselves. He said, okay, nice watch. Okay, let's continue. Let's talk. Because if he would see something too popular, something too known, something too basic, without absolutely no complication or nothing really special, what we could have in watchmaking, he would just stop talking to me. You see, this lady, even after some experience, after some activities, she didn't go to the point. So you are accepted if you go to the point and if you manage to share it. To be accepted and to be respected, that takes effort and time.
It seems to me that you wanted other people not to face the same issue, meaning you went down this educational route so that other people could learn how to be accepted maybe faster by those the Swiss managers and professionals. That person, I think what they were trying to do is say, does this person speak my language? Does she know my vocabulary? Is she familiar with some of the things that are important to me? He can look at your watch and say, you know what? She's probably gone down this rabbit hole a little bit. But of course, you had to have that desire to do that. And then you at some point seem to want to catch other people up to speed. You wanted to bring more people into your world through education. What is it about your personality that you wanted to educate others to speak about some of the same concepts that you like?
Actually, it started when people started to came to me to ask for some questions, for some information, because they've seen me speaking passionately about this industry, about watches, about the history, about the complications. And because when you understand what is behind, when you see how complicated it is, how much hours it would take, how many people would be working on that, how long are the procedures of all the way in chain since the beginning till the end. It's not rare that 1 year would be needed to work on one watch. It's not rare that 300 hours would be spent only to some decoration. Or it's not rare that people will polish invisible parts by hand inside the movement. So, it's really one of the industry. That's why I call it a true luxury business. It's really on the top. It's really on the edge of the sophistication. I don't know that much sophistication in other luxury industries, with all my respect to beautiful craftsmanship we have everywhere. So that's why for me it became also a mission, and nowadays I call it a mission through my master classes, through my online course that's available for everybody. Mission to share this culture, to invite to discover this tradition that goes through one generation to another, that use sometimes the high-end machines of the last generation of the last technologies, or sometimes only by hand. There would be 3 or 5 people in the world who would do this kind of procedures. So that's why, for me, it became a mission to share, to invite, to show, to explain why the watch could be that expensive, why the watch could be this rare, why it's so limited, why it's so special.
There seems to be an inherent contradiction today between our, we'll call it, internet information culture, which wants answers right away, that wants to feel like you can watch a video online to become an expert, and the reality that learning about watches really requires a lot of effort and experience, seeing a lot of watches, asking yourself how you feel, learning it from the people that do it. How do you reconcile these things? This fact that you're trying to build a structured education, but at the same time, you can't replace simply having people take time and doing more and more of it over a period of months, if not years, if not decades.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely legitimate question, a very important question to think about. And before you ask me how long did it take me to acquire this knowledge, it's not about the timing. It's not always about the timing. I realize now that I had a chance to visit approximately 100 different production facilities, different companies, headquarters of companies. It took me all these visits to compare, to see, to distinguish, to categorize different kind of brands, different kind of procedures of what is behind. And yes, today we are living fortunately, we are living in the period when information could be easily gained, some kind of information. We know that if we Google or if we chat GPT something, it will be a kind of answer. We will get some kind of information, but we would never go to the details that could be only acquired on place or in exchange with the real people working there or the real people experiencing this. So it's more about experience than knowledge. And that is changing the perspective. It's not only in terms of time, it's in terms of how deep you would dive into this knowledge. Yes, to learn what does it mean a complication, or what does it mean a calendar, or what does it mean, I don't know, what different complication. But to understand that, for example, only on a dial, you can have up to 100 operations. To create only a dial of the face of your watch, but you just can't imagine that 100 operation could be done. And not any single chat GPT nowadays would give you this kind of information. You need to go to this company to talk with the person who spent a week for one single dial, for one single watch, or some other craftsmanship we could find only in Switzerland, by the way. Sometimes it's also not question the timing only, but the place, because you can't see this part of knowledge, is this part of information. You just can't have it elsewhere. That's why I'm very happy to be a provider. I invite people to visit companies. I organize different visits for really interested people. We could sometimes enter what is not acceptable, what is not accessible for everybody. And I know that you also, the person who is curious, who is visiting different companies, who has this chance, just this privilege to enter. But it takes time. It takes this kind of respect, and it's much more than just timing, but much more profound thing to see.
I think it's a very real phenomenon that if you visit a watch manufacturer if you've done a proper tour, by the time you leave, you really want what they make. Like, you don't care what the design is. You're just like, I want to have one of those things. I'm impressed. And you've had that experience and I've had that experience, but it's so common that even when the tour is not that great, like obviously the better tour, the more interested you are. But even if you just sort of walk through and get a little bit of a sense of what they're doing, the layers of being impressed by, as you said, how many people, how many processes it takes to make even seemingly simple things, the dedication, the amount of organization required to build the watches, it is just really hard to leave that place and not think, if I had the money or an opportunity, I would definitely get one of those things, right?
Yeah, you can't undo what you've seen. And when you've seen it, you became passionate about it. Even me, in general, mechanics, for me, like I'm coming from marketing, I'm from business environment. I'm never been interested into mechanics and technologies and physical operation. It's absolutely not my thing. But when I've seen it, when I was talking to the person who is doing it, when I've seen the proud explanation, I became respectful, I became passionate myself, and I want to understand, I want to see it, I want to discover more. And even if basically I was not at all into mechanics, now I'm really into mechanics.
I'm out of curiosity. I'm curious because you say you weren't into mechanics and now you're into mechanics. I was always into mechanics. I don't know what it's like to not be into mechanics and then be into mechanics. What are you into now that's obviously beyond watch movements or mechanics that maybe a previous version Maria was not into?
Previous version of Maria were about experience, were about communication, were about, marketing, branding, all these beautiful things that many people would appreciate. I mean, glamorous, luxury, what is shiny, whatever. Without giving too much of cliche, otherwise we will never stop. But when I've seen, when I understood that actually mechanic is an art, and fortunately 20 years ago, in the beginning of 2005, there were companies, they started to position themselves, and watchmaking industry is one more kind of art of mechanics. When you see that watch, it's actually the architecture, and the people, the person who would do it would be an architect himself. And we see that this combination, because inside the watch you will see from 100 pieces to 1,000 and even more sometimes, and they all work together perfectly. They all complete each other for many years without any stop. So that is absolutely mechanical art, one of the invention, as much as it would be cinema, as it would be literature, as it would be music or anything else. And I'm absolutely sure that there is all the legitimacy to say that this kind of mechanics became art, and that's why this Maria from the past who were interested in beautiful things became very interested into mechanics.
I've noticed a lot of people when they're younger love pretty things, but never ask themselves where pretty things come from. Love things that look like they perform well, but don't really ever test if they do perform well. And then if you are a curious person, which you are, I am, other people are, you ask yourself, does this go beyond the skin? Is it more than just looking pretty? Is it actually nice on the inside? It's very common in automobile design to make a vehicle look like it performs really well. It doesn't necessarily drive or turn fast. And I think in watches, you can't really get away with a lot of that. The form obviously follows the function in a large way. Obviously, there's decorative things there, but it's harder to fake it in watches, right? Like, it actually has to be good. It's a lot more difficult to make it only appear as though it's good.
Yes, absolutely right. It's impossible to fake it. even, for example, there would be some companies who would try to have some Chinese equipment or pretend to be a famous brand, whatever. It's there would be still some people try doing this. But what is more, it's difficult even to make it real, because I know many companies that were bankrupt. I know many watchmakers who didn't manage to live for several years. I mean, to survive on the market. So it's really a huge effort to survive, to have their place, to have a legitimate place, and to be respected as a company, as the brand, as the watch, as the movement, as the model of the watch. So it's not easy to fake, but it's not easy to create something really genuine.
Well, what comes to mind is that even fake watches need to work a little bit, right? It's not enough just to have the appearance of a machine. It still needs to work. And what you're talking about, at least in some part, are all these independent watchmakers who struggle to even make their watches operate like watches. Forget being pretty. In fact, many times it's easier to polish metal to look very nice, to make nice engravings, but to actually make parts that work for a few days and tell the time, that by itself, especially for a small team or a solo, engineer or watchmaker, that's really, really tough to do. And as you said, you can't fake it. The watch is either working or it's not.
Exactly. And especially when we are talking about luxury, when we are talking about some range of prices, when you buy a watch for 10,000, for 50,000, for 100,000, sometimes for 1 million, it's supposed, it gives the promise to stay, it gives the promise to be reliable, to continue working for many years, many decades, sometimes for generations. So it's a promise to keep.
Movado has been making watches for well over 100 years. It all started in 1881 in La Chaux-de-Fonds, Switzerland. At the beginning of the 20th century, Movado started producing hundreds of wristwatch models, while other companies were still focused on pocket watches. Early watch designs often eschewed round cases for alternative shapes. Square-shaped wristwatches were an immediate hit with consumers from the very beginning. As early as 1917, Movado was releasing square watches at the outset of the Art Deco era, just before the Roaring Twenties. Today, Movado honors that legacy with the new Heritage 1917 collection of men's and women's timepieces drawn directly from the authentic 1917 design. The Movado Heritage 1917 family of wristwatches features a variety of styles, including automatic mechanical movements in all of the 35mm wide versions. Inspired by the past, but faithful to modern expectations, the 1917 watches feature classic, legible dials, modest wearing proportions, and are available in a men's 35mm wide size and a women's 25mm wide size, as well as a choice of bracelet or strap attachment options. Designed with all wearers in mind, the Heritage 1917 is nevertheless an enthusiast product featuring design excellence and Swiss-made mechanisms. Check out the Movado Heritage 1917 watches at department stores, select jewelers, or online at movado.com. How do you evolve your educational courses? That, I understand that you give a lot of lectures, you do a lot of classes. How do you add to it? Do you say we need to learn about these new watches, or there's a new confusing thing or a new brand? How do you build that course over time?
Actually, it started from the basics, because first of all, you need to understand the basics. And by the way, I don't know if you or your audience know that luxury watchmaking did not start in Switzerland. It's just developed afterwards, outside in other countries, for example. So we need to learn the history. We need to learn some paths, some key points. Then who are the key players? Then what are the complications? What would be the models? What would be the most famous brands? What I love to talk about branding, about different brands, why this one is that important, why another one is so special, why the third one is absolutely unique as the strategy, as the positioning, as the way of developing. But then I see what is happening on the markets, where the preferences is switching, what are the tendencies, what are the challenges, how the market itself is evolving, because I can't give the same lecture nowadays that I did in the beginning like 10 years ago, because world is different, situation is different, market situation is different, complications are completely different. So every time I try to adapt and to see what is happening. What is more, every time I give lectures to different cultures, unfortunately, I have this pleasure to talk to Americans, to Indians, to Chinese, sometimes to Russians, sometimes to European. And I try to see what would be important for them, because we do have cliche that some people would like more mechanics, some people would like more reserved brands, some people would like some more shiny or diamonds or some other features added to the watch. So first of all, the base. Then we see what is happening nowadays, because I'm still keeping monitoring what is happening elsewhere, not only in Switzerland, in general, what is the tendency, where we go, and what is interesting. I always ask also the questions, what would you like to know? What is important to you to know? I'm here for you. I'm collecting, every day I'm collecting new knowledges about watchmaking since more than 10 years. So I'm quite flexible, and I'm quite comfortable to speak on different subjects, at least in to some extent.
Now, I understand you do education for multiple audiences. Some of those audiences are, we'll call consumers. Some of those audiences are people that work in the industry. For consumers, you're talking about how to understand watches and culture and stuff like that, and that makes a lot of sense. When you do education for people in the watch industry, obviously you have a marketing background, but talk a little bit about some of the specific things that you're teaching them. What are some of the areas that they have need for external education and development? I know they do. I just want to hear it from you.
Actually, it's absolutely a controversial way of teaching when I'm teaching Swiss professionals. Because here we have a tendency to speak about watches, to speak about complications, to speak about technical characteristics. But when I'm teaching, for example, when I'm training to sales team or some managers, I want them to give the content, the context, what is around, what is happening. So why a person would be interested from another side, because it's a kind of myopia that we would have in marketing. We see only from one perspective. Like, we are in Switzerland, we produce watches, our watches are the best if I'm talking to one particular company or to another. So they're kind of formatted. For me, it's important to open the vision and to explain that different audiences would buy the same watch for different reasons, or with different expectations. And this kind of experience, this kind of marketing level that we need to address, or cultural level, that is what is important. So not saying from inside out, I have the watch, look on it, but every time we are taking a consumer-centric perspective outside in. Why it could be interesting, why it's attractive, why it's so impressive. And that's why my trainings are quite interesting, because I give this perspective from outside of the company, of the brand, of the corporate structure or corporate strategy.
Thank you. I definitely agree that they have to think about the problem of communication like the consumer sees the problem. And the consumer, for me, is the king. Brands often have a very, I think, backward perspective. They're like, it's consumers' jobs to find out about us and learn why we're cool. And I'm like, if that's your perspective, you're going to become popular a very long time from now. You can do a lot of things to make that journey a lot easier. And yet, you and I both, I'm sure we agree that brands are very resistant to the obligation to communicate. They feel that after they've made the watch and packaged the watch, their job is done. And I can understand that because historically it's definitely been that way. But do you agree that the majority of brands also have the completely separate task to communicate to the world why they should care about what they do?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, in the corporate world, these are very separate departments of marketing, of communication, of production, and sales. And in big corporations, it's not very much connected. And I would give you, because I'm absolutely agree with what you've just said about this obligation to be customer-centric or to be into experience of watchmaking. There is one very famous French brand that started in jewelry, nowadays producing watches. Everybody knows it. There is a nice cat as a representation of this brand. When we go to the boutique, everybody loves this brand. They have token pieces. They have very iconic watches. But me, myself, every time I'm traveling, I'm going to the boutiques, and I'm also organizing mystery shopping activities for different brands. And every time when I send as a mystery shopper to this particular brand, everybody is expecting champagne, croissant, some ceremony, beautiful design of the boutique. But the impression when they are leaving, whatever, it doesn't important if they are customers, if they bought something or didn't. And I realized that in 93% of all the cases we went there, I'm talking about several, almost around 100 visits we made for several years. The experience is absolutely awful. We went to the boutique, or the people went to the boutique with expectation of being treated as it should be in luxury when we are supposed to buy the watch. But just in this example to show that some companies are still in the old way of seeing luxury, that you need to gain the opportunity to be there. Then you need to gain the opportunity to touch this watch, to see this watch, to be a customer of the company. And unfortunately, with some exception, but many French brands, many French way of seeing luxury would be this. For example, in contrast to Italian, where is Dolce Vita, where it's much more acceptable, where it's much more open to share, to discuss, to participate. And we do have these different approaches that's not always connected to the reality of nowadays, because nowadays the profile of wealthy consumers are completely different. It's not the kind of all royal families that were had an exceptions. Nowadays, world is completely different. But still, some companies did not understood this customer centricity importance and this openness, kind of openness or certain openness. Sure, I'm still talking about some certain level of communication, but we see that it's, with all my respect, with all my love to this beautiful industry, we see that it's not always on the same timing of what we're living now.
How dangerous is it to fundamentally miscalculate it? I think that, of course, there's cultural differences and there's also generational differences, but I think that it doesn't take a lot of effort to determine that this, we'll call it old French way of luxury as being exclusive, and that you have to convince the brand to do business with you. If this works anywhere anymore, it's a very small part of the world, and it's definitely not outside of France. Most other places don't like it. So the question again is, how dangerous is it for brands to fundamentally ignore this part of their business, and that is how they make the customer feel in a retail or a transactional setting?
Nowadays, it's quite dangerous. Because in Swiss watchmaking, only in Swiss watchmaking, we have 200 different brands. And if a very demanding, very successful person is not getting when and how he would expect getting what he wants, we are not tolerant anymore. In our period of life we are living in, this part of our existence, technologies, possibilities, different choices made us much less tolerant. So we just switch. Yeah, there are some iconic models, but I know personally many stories that person were turned out to go out of the boutique and ordered online. Boutique didn't have this money. Or I know when a person wanted to buy one special watch, one special brand, but they didn't had what they expected, they turned to another one.
I think a lot of brands miss this. I explained to brands that, and again, if you disagree, by all means disagree, that people are, first of all, they're not loyal to brands. They're not loyal to models. They're loyal to price points. They're loyal to people that make them feel good. They're loyal to relationships that benefit them. And they will spend their money with whoever validates them the most. And if you don't validate them in the way they want to be validated, they're essentially buying that. They're buying the opportunity to have another person make them feel good. If their money doesn't do that for them, unless they're stupid or stubborn or I don't know what, combative, they're probably going to go elsewhere, because at the end of the day, despite a brand's rich history and how awesome you polish screws, the entire experience is supposed to make the customer feel good about themselves. And that's the most important thing, right?
Absolutely right. I almost have nothing to do to add here, because it's an excellent resume. What is happening? Your feeling, your impression, your analyze is absolutely perfect. What is happening nowadays? 10 years ago, it wasn't the case. 20 years ago, it wasn't the case. But nowadays, with new technologies again, with the possibility of traveling, with possibility of different treatment, and our self-esteem, our changing perception of what is important nowadays in life, it is absolutely true. Where customers are not loyal anymore.
And one of the things that's been a big part of my agenda recently is to use the word hobby to describe a big part of the watch consumer culture today. It's not exclusively a hobby for everyone, but people get into watches because they're intellectually curious. They're into watches because it provides them a topic of conversation with friends, whether it's in person or communities online. It's a distraction. It's something that they can do after work or just to relax. And that's very different than, I need to wear a watch to all those fancy work events, right? Or I'm going on all these job interviews, I need to have the right timepiece. It's not that those things aren't important, but they're a lot less common. People are wearing watches with suits a lot less often. If they are, then they probably work for a watch brand and then they don't get to choose what watch they wear. The reason that people like watches or the way they use them has changed, but so much of the industry still seems to think that you're going out on a night on the town wearing a tuxedo, when that matches a very small percentage of how people actually use these products, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you use the word hobby, I use the word passion, because it's also the perception of what does it mean to be a wealthy person. Because some people would say, I'm wealthy because I have this kind of status, this amount of money, this kind of objects. But we're talking also about social wealth. I mean, what kind of people are around me, with whom I'm in contact, what are my interactions. And there is cultural wealth. That is absolutely different perspective. When we're talking about culture, when we're talking about education, when we are talking about sophistication, when we are talking about understanding some things, understanding some reasons, understanding what is behind, what is further, as you said, tuxedo or some kind of brands. So it's about cultural wealth. And one thing is to show off, to say, look, I have this or I have that. And that's why for me it's very interesting to see that sometimes when I see very famous people worldwide. I have an example of one very famous American actor who has not extremely expensive brand wearing during his wedding. I mean, very famous actor. I believe it's his first marriage at the age of 50. So it's quite exceptional, and for him and for everybody who loves him all around the world. And he should certainly have wedding planners. So like 5 people will organize everything. He don't need actually the watch for this day. And here's wearing the watch with his wedding costume. And this is not the most expensive, the most top of the luxury. We see that this person value different things in another perspective. He's not there to show off. He's not there to prove something, anything else to anybody else. We see what is real conviction.
It kind of sounds like you wanted him to be wearing a nicer watch on his wedding, though.
I was talking with the company of this watch, and they wasn't. It was really his choice because it's very famous person wearing very famous brand. I had the pleasure to talk to a CEO of this company with this, and he promised it wasn't on the agreement.
We're in an era right now where a lot of brands are leaning heavily into celebrities wearing their watches, and this is, of course, nothing new. As long as we've been in the industry, we've seen advertisements with celebrities and ambassadors and things like that. But it's taken a very different form these days. It's become both more prolific and less organized, where it's sort of haphazard. It's very unclear what the business relationship is. It's very unclear who's working with who. But brands are sort of doing it more than ever. And I'm curious from your perspective, because you speak to a lot of people in regard to marketing, what is their fascination with celebrity and what are their hopes? It definitely is not a complete validator of a brand or a product. It can definitely help, but there seems to be so much emphasis into this. What is the reason given by the people in the Swiss watch industry as to why they're so preoccupied with this particular form of communication?
Yeah, it's not the new way of collaborating. Ambassadors existed since many years, and since 10 years I'm watching also this kind of tendency, and I realized that many people would change, many ambassadors would change one company after another. Like 5 years it was one brand, today it's another one, next year it will be another one on the same person, so consistency is not always there. But I just want to attract your attention to one fact that I just got in my mind now. The 2 most famous companies, the most desirable, the most known worldwide, they don't have ambassadors. Just not. Officially, not contractual.
Well, sure, but I think the brands you're talking about probably have plenty of pictures out there with famous people wearing them.
Absolutely. Everywhere. On all Instagram, every day I see this. And these are the people who would buy it because you are supposed to have this kind of watch. You are expected to have this kind of watch. It's your status, it's your position. And that's why, for me, it's very interesting to see when people would collection the same brands or ask for particular models, very personalized, unique pieces, etc., etc. So here it's a little bit different. But there are companies who would strengthen their positioning, strengthen their visibility with different ambassadors. Okay, we have one in China, we have one in Europe, we have one in Russia, we have one in Africa, we have one in film, we have one in music, we have one in football, in tennis, whatever. So that is also a kind of strategy to be visible. That's why sponsoring and ambassadors would always be there. But what kind of audience we want to attract?
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. I want the industry to always examine their behavior. There's a tendency to copy what other people are doing in a way that means your own behavior kind of becomes generic. And I don't think brands always understand why they're doing what they're doing. They're just copying someone else. And I think that's a problem because it doesn't lend personality. It's sort of like you are getting your name out there, sure. But when people learn about your brand, they're given no further message. It's like brand being worn by pretty person, but that's it. And, you know, and I, as an American, I feel that coming from a very established consumer market, you know, I think sometimes the Swiss especially find Americans to be too direct, but I actually think that's a good thing. And American consumers are the least shy when it comes to a rebuttal of a product, you know, value proposition. If we don't like something, we'll be like, that's too expensive. And I think with watches, a big problem, a big question I have a lot is like, okay, you make a watch. What makes yours different? Why did you make a watch? There's a lot of other watches. I know that you want to sell a watch. Your watch looks like other watch I'm familiar with. What did you do that's worth paying attention to? And it's almost like a lot of brands are just shy to say this. And I think it's funny because you have brands that go so far through the process, but then when it comes to that message, that pitch of just explain to somebody simply, why does this product exist and who is it for? Like, nothing comes out of their mouth. And I find this to be strange. And I'm wondering if you have any opinion as to why they can't come up with some of these basic messages, like, why did you make that watch?
It depends on the values of the brands. It depends on what they want, what they could share. And as with different customers, we see that the motivations would be different, the triggers would be different. Some want resemble to somebody. Some would like to have something unique or something special, something different. Simple as that.
How do you get someone to be so happy with a brand experience that they want to buy again? Because I think a lot of consumers recognize there's a lot of watch brands out there, and they very predictably will sample. They'll be like, I'm going to buy from this brand, I'm going to buy from this brand, I'm going to buy from this brand. And this is good for consumers, but brands, they freak out. They're like, oh, do we lose the consumer? Why are they buying from someone else? And I think the brands aren't fair. They expect this loyalty. And there's certain brands I know who've done very, very well with selling many watches to the same consumer over a period of years. How can brands, in your opinion, keep a customer around? Maybe not through every purchase, but what can brands do to make it so that customers are willing to do business with them multiple times in the future?
That's a very great question. And if I would answer it, I maybe became extremely famous or extremely rich, or maybe I would have a Nobel Prize in watchmaking.
Good, you're so close to being famous then.
Yeah. Actually, it's a question of experience, but more than that, it's a question of personal touch. It is a question of personal connection. If we will manage to do this, if we will manage to touch some parts of the soul of the person. It's extremely difficult to make it in the boutique. It's extremely difficult to make while person would be traveling. It's extremely difficult to make in one special boutique, because here in Geneva we will have one boutique of the brands, in Zurich another one, in Paris in 3 hours of train on 1 hour of plane we will have another one. Monaco is also 1 hour from here. So if I don't like or if I don't find this model in this particular boutique, I don't care about relationship. I will go to Milan, I will go to Paris, I will go to Monaco to buy, to call them and to ask if they have my model, if they have what I want. So that's why today it's really important for brands to reinvent the way of communicating, reinvent the way to treat your customer, to be in contact with the customer. Because nowadays, and I know that one more example, I had a person from Geneva went to Milan. It's like 3 hours of train to buy and to have luxury experience in the boutique. It were Italian Dolce Vita lifestyle fashion brand. And the question of the purchase was about $3,000, the product she wanted to buy there. And they didn't serve her the coffee she was expecting in Italy to have when you are in luxury boutique. For some reason, the coffee machine did not work. And the person did not got the experience she wanted. She left the boutique. She came back home to Geneva and she ordered online the delivery of this 3,000 purchase. Just because in Milano coffee is $1 price, just because of $1 of this lack of this attention, lack of this proactivity, or this customer-centric or emotional intelligence, because the girl were really passionate about this brand. She wanted to have this experience, and she made this road of 3 hours by train, probably for a weekend or something. And the question of the procedures, the question of corporate strategy were not executed to its best, and they lose it. And the girl was absolutely happy. She got a beautiful packaging, home delivery in 2 days with the same prices, etc., etc. So difficult.
You know, that's an interesting story, and it's reminded me of another danger, which I'm seeing a lot more today than when I started. And it's actually the opposite of under-promising. It's over-promising. A lot of brands, either directly or through the mythology around them, have this strange reputation of how amazing wearing their watch is going to make you feel, or all the attention you're going to get, all the doors it's going to open for you, or how well you're going to be treated. And what I started seeing over the last several years is people who would go through this process and buy the watch and whatever, and then feel underwhelmed. And I think that they had, truly unrealistic expectations to begin with. And a lot of this is, maybe some of the media, the auction culture and everything like that. But I think it's also very important to discuss what happens when you overpromise, because if anything, if there's anything worse than not telling your story, it's telling a fake story or a false one. And when consumers are disappointed, not only have you lost them for life, but sometimes they become like jihadists, right? Where they go out and they want to destroy you because they're angry and they want to tell all their friends.
Yes. And it's really a great observation. You're absolutely right. When I'm teaching customer experience, when I'm teaching the sales procedures, I am saying that there are 4 levels of customer experience. First is what we expect when we want to go to a boutique. The second is what we get, actually, for different reasons. But we have also corporate perspective, what were imagined by the managers, by corporate strategy, by communication, by beautiful photoshopped pictures or wonderfully filmed videos, and what were really executed in the boutique, in the shop. Again, no coffee machine, or maybe it's too hot, or maybe it's too cold, or maybe the music was not there, or maybe, I don't know, whatever. So these 4 levels should be aligned. And if it's not impossible, it's extremely difficult to do, because so many factors will impact, so many elements would add to these procedures. So that's why the best the companies would have is to keep it in mind, not over-promising like everybody's perfect on Instagram, everybody's perfect on video, but then to see what could be done.
So here's an interesting question, and I'd love your perspective. Can you fundamentally have a complicated guide for sales and marketing people to behave? Or is it really them making case-by-case decisions and you just teaching them what the vision is, how to approach the situation, and what to do given their best their best judgment? Because I see brands try to do it both ways, and sometimes I feel like the overly rigid way simply cannot take into consideration all the different types of variables. But if you don't teach people what the customer is supposed to feel and don't explain the full vision, then that person who's interacting with the consumer is probably going to make a lot of mistakes. And so from your perspective, what makes the most sense? Having a very detailed user guide for employees, or sort of teaching everyone best practices and the vision and hope that they figure out a way of doing it themselves?
I think we could speak about this for one day at least. But
good.
But to make
we have like 2 minutes.
That's why I will be short. That's why I will be short to make the long story very short. Think about artificial intelligence and human intelligence. Artificial, when we have all the procedures, well, we have algorithms, well, we have the written points, the structure, the strategy, the guidelines, and then we have human intelligence. Fortunately, still not outperformed by all the help of artificial intelligence. Still, it's only human who would, intelligent human, not everybody, I mean, intelligent or knowledgeable or culturally developed person who knows the basics and he has the liberty, who has the ability to go outside of this solid structure and to see on the case by case, on the person by person experience. Because as I told you, the same watch would not be sold or will not be bought by the same reason by Russian, American, Chinese, Indian, or French person.
I think it's such an important message because even though in the watch industry, the consumer ultimately is buying a thing, that thing is usually a vector for some type of human relationship. Whether it's a community of friends that you want to speak about that watch with, maybe it's the relationship with a watchmaker or artist that made the watch, or it's with the person that sold you the watch. But the human relationship part cannot be taken out of the element of getting excited about a watch or buying a watch. And yet, I'm sure you'll agree, it's the number one area where brands mess up. Oftentimes, brands have amazing product, but people are so thwarted or turned off by the interaction they have that they say, no, I don't care how nice your watch is. I don't like how you made me feel. And therefore, I'm going to remember that every single time I look at the dial. And for me, especially these days where a lot of brands want to sell direct, they have to get this right. Right? This is absolutely crucial given how competitive the space is. Please, as again, we're out of time, but please respond to that because I think that it's such a crucial takeaway from this entire discussion.
It's a crucial takeaway from entire discussion because since the beginning, watchmaking 200 years ago, it were the personal connection, the personal realization, and the sales were extremely important. And that's why it's completely different area of business knowledges, of business activities, of business units to sell the watch. Produce is one thing, and here Swiss people are genius, but selling watches is completely different. And nowadays we're living after all these changes worldwide, when human touch, human experience, personal connection, personal exchange, and human link between people, between brands, between the watches and the objects, etc., extremely important. That is what is only one thing that could be changed to outperform what is happening. Because you can't change the watch, you can't change the production, you can't change what is inside, but customer experience is the only one thing to what you can act.
Before our next conversation, I want to take one of your courses, and then we'll have even more to talk about.
I have a course online. You're welcome.
On that note, Maria, can you please tell everyone where they can learn more about you on the internet?
So LinkedIn or networks like social network, Instagram, I have a link to True Luxury Business. That is the name because when we're talking about watchmaking, we are talking about true luxury and business is important. So Instagram, trueluxury.business, online webpage also with the same name, and Maria Bashutkina on LinkedIn. It's my pleasure to connect.
This has been the Superlative podcast interview with Maria Bashutkina. Maria, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ariel.